2019, over 45,000 DUI arrests occurred in the state of Florida. Most of the drivers who were arrested for DUI had no prior criminal history. A DUI can truly happen to anyone. I have personally represented nurses, firefighters, police officers, doctors, college kids, and even a fellow attorney on DUI charges with successful results. Although a first-time DUI is considered a misdemeanor in the state of Florida, individuals accused of this crime face harsher than usual penalties. That's because Florida has what's called minimum mandatory sanctions for a DUI. For a first-time DUI, if you're convicted of the crime, you will face up to 6 months in jail, 12 months of supervised probation, a minimum of 6 months driver license revocation, a minimum fine of $500 to $1,000, 10 days of vehicle impoundment, which you have to pay for yourself, up to 200 hours of community service, completion of a 12-hour DUI counterattack school and any related substance abuse treatment, completion of a psychological evaluation, completion of a 2-hour victim awareness panel class, and payment of court costs as well as the cost of investigation. You may also have a special condition of probation that prohibits you from entering into bars or clubs or consuming any alcohol at all. On top of all of that, if you're convicted of a DUI, your insurance company will require you to get high-risk insurance. The average increase in insurance payments 3 years after a conviction is still 67% higher than before a conviction at the time of me shooting this video in 2020. All of those sanctions that I just rattled off that may have your head spinning are just for a first-time DUI, but only if you're convicted of that crime. Following the advice in this video and hiring the right criminal defense and DUI defense attorney for your case is the only way for you to increase your chances of avoiding a DUI conviction. Now that you know what the penalties are, let's talk about a DUI from the traffic stop all the way to the end of the case. I'll give you pointers and suggestions that may help you avoid getting a DUI conviction, or at the very least, make your attorney's job a little easier. Obviously, the easiest way to avoid a DUI is just not to drink and drive at all. With Uber and designated drivers, there's no reason to drink and drive. But mistakes do happen, and DUIs occur all the time. They happen to the best of people. So I hope the information in this video, although not legal advice, may still be helpful. The traffic stop, how to deal with getting pulled over, and the initial DUI investigation. Traffic stops can occur for hundreds of reasons. Maybe you were speeding, you did an improper lane change, your tint is too dark, the light over your license plate is out, your tail light's out, you sped up and slowed down abnormally, you went over the white line more than 3 times in a mile, you didn't fully stop at a stop sign. There are truly hundreds of reasons for police to stop a vehicle. So drive as safely as possible, but it may be inevitable that if you drive drunk enough times, you'll eventually get pulled over. If you do get pulled over, follow the following tips. Tip number 1, you should always have your license, registration, and proof of insurance in a place that you can easily find it. I know this sounds silly, but the officer will ask you for these items, and you don't want to be fumbling around through your glove compartment while the officer stands next to your window and looks into your car with a flashlight. It gives the officer more time to observe what are called signs of impairment. Oftentimes, police reports will state that the officer approached the driver's side window and the driver took a long time fumbling through their documents. This is a sign of impairment because a drunk person has a harder time finding documents than a sober person. So have your ID, proof of registration, and proof of insurance handy. Once you hand that to the police officer, if he or she smells alcohol or thinks you've been drinking, they will usually ask you incriminating questions such as, have you been drinking tonight? Or how much have you had to drink? They may even say something like, I smell alcohol on you. Where are you coming from? Tip number 2 then is not to answer any of these questions. You have the right to remain silent. In fact, it's a constitutional right under the 5th Amendment. You have to give the cop your documentation, but you do not have to answer any of these incriminating questions. So don't. Be polite, but be assertive. And tell the officer that you do not wish to answer any of those questions and that if you're being questioned for a crime, you'd like to have a lawyer present. I know it's awkward to do this during your interaction with the cop, but telling the officer that you just had 2 beers and that you were coming from your friend's house at 3 a.m. in the morning is not going to help your case once it gets to court. A lot of people think that by being cool or just being honest with the cops, it's going to help them. Trust me, it's not. Everything you say can and will be used against you in court. Telling the police that you do not wish to answer any questions is much better than saying something that will incriminate you. Tip number 3, avoid field sobriety tests. You've probably seen field sobriety tests on TV, the walk and turn, the one-leg stand, or the horizontal gaze nystagmus. These are all popular field sobriety exercises, but they're misunderstood by the public. Let's take the horizontal gaze nystagmus test for example. This is when an officer holds a pen in front of your eyes and moves it side to side. Many people don't realize what this test is actually meant to do. For example, the horizontal gaze nystagmus test is not testing to see if you can actually follow the pen with your eyes. It's testing to see your eye muscles' tracking ability and your ability to follow directions. The cops will tell you to hold your head still and follow the stimuli with your eyes. When someone drinks alcohol, it affects their body just like any other substance would, at a biochemical level. One of the side effects is that when a person holds their eyes out to the side, if they've consumed alcohol, their eye will actually involuntarily twitch. That's actually one of the things that the cop is looking for during the HGN exercise. So there's really no way to beat the field sobriety exercises. On top of that, I've seen instances where police purposely make things more difficult than they need to be, and then they hold it against the driver. For example, cops will sometimes pull that pen just a little too far so that you're forced to move your head, and then they'll hold it against you because you didn't follow directions and you didn't hold your head still. In order to ask you to perform field sobriety exercises, the police officer must have reasonable suspicion of a DUI. This is based on signs of impairment, such as the smell of alcoholic beverages, bloodshot, watery eyes, an orbital sway, dry mouth, person is confused or slowly moving, and others. The officer will usually say something like, "Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, I smell alcohol in your breath, you were speeding, and I think that you're under the influence of alcohol. I'd like you to do some exercises for me to dispel my suspicion so that I can let you go along your way." Or they may say something like, "I think you're under the influence and I can make an arrest decision right now based on what I see. Or you can do these exercises for me and I may change my mind." Don't fall for that. You're not going to perform field sobriety exercises so well that a cop that already thinks you're impaired will just let you go. Even when sober, it's very difficult to perform these exercises properly. When you're impaired, on the side of the road, and nervous as hell, you're not going to perform these very well. When I was a DUI prosecutor in Orange County, I had the pleasure of working with new officers during their DUI training. As part of this training, we conducted what's called a wet lab. We used volunteers from the University of Central Florida. These college students volunteered to basically get drunk for us to varying degrees. Don't worry, we bought them pizza and everyone got a safe ride home. During the wet lab, our job was to have new officers make the call on whether to arrest the individual college student or not based on their performance of field sobriety exercises. Every single college student failed the field sobriety exercises and they were arrested. Even the ones that had not had a sip of alcohol. The sober ones could not properly do the one-leg stand or the walk and turn. They were nervous and they did not follow instructions well. The field sobriety exercises are designed to be tough to follow instructions and to perform well. If you have a previous injury or are wearing high heels or flip-flops or you're heavy set, you're not going to do these well. These exercises will not help you. What the cop really wants is for you to perform the field sobriety exercises so that they have more evidence to use against you in the prosecution of the DUI. Something else to really think about when dealing with the DUI or any interaction with law enforcement is that you're on camera. Everything you do during this interaction is on video, and video speaks 1,000 words to the jury or judge. So remember that during the entire interaction. Juries don't usually need to see someone falling over or stumbling over themselves to believe that they are impaired. They just need to see small cues, like maybe you staring off into the distance at odd times or not being able to follow simple instructions. These are all signs of impairment, and a good prosecutor can get a conviction on a DUI at trial using just these simple things. If the jury thinks you look drunk, that may be enough for a conviction unless you have a very savvy defense attorney who can change their minds or explain your behavior. I should know this well. I've tried dozens of DUI cases both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. The video in these cases is much more important than the officer's testimony because jurors like to decide things using their own eyes rather than listening to a cop tell his version of it. The next step after the field sobriety exercises, whether you decide to perform them or not, is for the cop to make his or her decision to arrest you. If a police officer pulls you over and suspects you of DUI, odds are that you will be arrested. Think about this. If you were a cop and you stopped someone for running a stop sign or a red light or speeding and they smelled like alcohol, would you let them go and drive off? What if they killed someone on their way home? Would you have a job after that? What would people think of you as a cop? What would your bosses think? You have to understand that it's easier for a cop to arrest someone for a DUI and get them off the road, even if their case gets dismissed, than it is for them to let someone go home who may be impaired and hurt someone. So if you're arrested for a DUI, don't freak out. If you took my advice and did not answer any incriminating questions and did not perform field sobriety exercises, then you're on the right path to having a strong case in your favor. Getting arrested is just being accused of a crime. Yes, it sucks, but the arrest is not the end-all be-all. It's actually just the beginning of your case in court. Once you're arrested for a DUI, the police will either take you to jail or to a breath testing center, depending on what county you're in. They'll keep you in a holding cell and do a 20-minute observation of you to make sure that you don't ingest anything that would alter breath results. Then they'll request you to provide breath. It's within your right to refuse this request. If you refuse, your license will automatically be suspended for 6 months to a year. But if you blow over .08, your license will be suspended anyway, and you just gave the state more evidence against you. Ultimately, the decision to do field sobriety exercises or to provide a breath or blood sample is up to you. As a defense attorney, the less evidence that the state has of a crime, the easier it is for me to get my client a good result. So if there are no field sobriety exercises and no breath, it's much harder for the state to prove a DUI based on just a driving pattern and the smell of alcohol. Remember, it's not illegal to drink and drive. It's illegal to be over the limit of .08 or to be too impaired to drive. There's a huge difference. If the cops get a warrant for a blood draw, do not fight them. Never ever resist or fight the cops. You can refuse to answer questions, you can ask for an attorney, you can ask for a supervisor, you can ask them what reasonable suspicion or probable cause they have to stop you or search you, you can refuse to consent to any searches or seizures, but you should never ever physically resist cops. Once this has all occurred, you've been arrested, you refuse field sobriety exercises, and you refuse to provide a breath or blood sample, you're going to get booked into jail. This is the absolute worst part of the entire process of getting a DUI. Stay calm if you're getting arrested, stay calm at the breath testing center, and stay calm at the jail. At the jail, you'll have to answer basic questions about your name and date of birth, but you don't need to say anything about the traffic stop or getting arrested or being impaired. Also, once in jail, make the most of your phone time. Unlike in TV shows and in the movies, you actually do not have a right to one phone call. You're entitled to an attorney and to remain silent, but not a phone. That's a privilege. So be nice to the staff at the jail, be compliant, and they'll let you use the phone. Call someone you trust who will get in contact with an attorney immediately or a bail bondsman to bond you out. Jail food sucks, so try to get someone to bond you out as soon as possible. Try to avoid other inmates as well. Just stay to yourself and relax. Stay calm. The situation is what it is. You got arrested for DUI. Don't make things worse. Get someone to bond you out and then immediately begin searching for the best criminal defense lawyer you can find. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found the information to be helpful. As always, nothing I said in this video or in any of my videos creates an attorney-client relationship between myself and whoever's on the other side of this video camera.